Hello everyone and welcome to our 6th week of TRG 45 this week. That's right, for 1 week only. TRG 30 is changing to TRG 45 for a very special reason. Welcome to those who have been with us before, and welcome if this is your first time joining. Remember, you can catch up with all of our past webinars online at trgarts.com. And as we begin, I'd like to remind you that you'll all receive an email with a copy of today's presentation and a video of this webinar too. Before we begin, a reminder, the Q&A button is the place to go. If you have any specific questions today, there'll be some time for Q&A at the end of the session. You can submit those anonymously if you wish to. And if we don't answer your question live today, then the LinkedIn TRG30 virtual network is the place to go to find your answer. Jill, over to you to kick us off for this special TRG 45.
Stephen, thank you so much and welcome to everyone. I am so glad to be with you for this week's edition of TRG 30, TRG 45. I will be announcing our special guest or welcoming him momentarily, but a reminder that this week's edition is just like the weeks when we've been together before, where we are addressing the urgent in the crisis as it relates to our needs in the arts and cultural sector. We're anticipating the needs that we have in coming weeks and months, and most importantly, hopefully, revolutionizing the way that we think and act so that our sector can use this time to evolve. Today's conversation is firmly rooted in this last concept of revolutionizing the way that we think and act. It is indeed focused on a new framework, or a framework that in fact is not new to us conceptually, but that might be a framework that could be used more deeply and widely to help us be resilient through and result in or help us have a result that's different when we come out on the other side as it relates to how we manage our relationships with customers and our relationships with that other important group of people, our team members, our board members, volunteers, employees, artists, our people who make this and our organizations, the sector in our organizations possible. You all are familiar with the concept of the Net Promoter Score, and there's data that tells this story. At the beginning of 2019, we at TRG we implemented a survey about surveys and learned that 90% of you almost are regularly surveying. 60% of you are asking this question that our guest has created called the Net Promoter Score. And a full, or a group of you, 37% of you, are asking the associated open-ended question that goes with the Net Promoter question. Would you recommend my concert, show, organization to a friend? So 37% of you are asking the adjoining question, why that score? And just 15% of you are closing that loop, the all-important closing of the loop with customers and employees. We're going to come back to that proportion and that number, but as you've seen, my friend and new colleague, our guest today, Fred Reichheld, has joined us. He is the creator of the Net Promoter Score and system, long tenured career at the international management consulting firm Bain and Company, and you, in fact, Fred, developed the company's loyalty practice. I'm so pleased to have you join us today, and would love for you just to take a moment to share with our assembled group here a little bit about your background and why loyalty, why the Net Promoter system and score.
Thank you, Jill. The Net Promoter evolved out of a long stream of work I've been involved in at Bain since I joined in the late 70s. I noticed that the organizations that I most admired in business, that were growing faster, more profitably, treating people right, they were generating cash and profitable growth in a way that just couldn't be explained by traditional accounting and traditional financial analysis. And over time, we started to build an understanding that, boy, when organizations treat people right, earn their loyalty, and they turn their customers into promoters who come back for more and bring their friends, that actually drives success in a much more powerful way than traditional business school would have you. Classic sales and marketing, that's how you get your new customers, and then you give them great service. That's the operations department, and so on and so forth. Over time, this has evolved from a economic framework to a way of measuring success of a business and retention rates and so forth. In my early work, to this metric, Net Promoter Score, which is just simply asking customers how likely you'd recommend us to a friend, 0 through 10. And promoters are the people who give 9s and 10s, but more importantly, they come back for more. They bring their friends. They build your reputation. They give feedback to your organization that energizes it and inspires it to keep going through the tough times. So the true asset, in my view of the world, is a customer who has been won over and is that kind of asset. And yet, when you think about how you track your accounting, almost no one keeps track of their promoters and what their balance sheet looks like. They tend to look at working capital and debt and all the classic things that an accountant would look like. But good organizations, I think great organizations, are thinking about, of all the lives I've touched, how many have I enriched so greatly that they really care about my success and are going to tell all their friends to experience it. And I've been building that model for a long time. It's been a very slow build. When we were chatting, Jill, I think you asked me what percentage of the business world now uses Net Promoter. Yeah. It's up over 2/3, which is astonishing. Given a standing start at around 2001, to have something that is actually the dominant framework, it's pretty astonishing. On the other hand, the vast majority of people use it in a very superficial way, and they really don't understand it yet. Because at its core, Net Promoter is not a score. It's a philosophy of how you treat people. It's sort of biblical, if you'll forgive me, but this notion of love thy neighbor, enrich the lives you touch, that's the underlying objective. In the book that I'm working on right now for Harvard Business Review Press, the title is Primary Purpose, the unbeatable business of enriching lives. And what it's going to point out is that the companies that have done the best job of enriching customer lives, and measured by Net Promoter is a pretty good way, those with the highest Net Promoter Score are growing faster, making more money. Those that are public companies, their stock total shareholder returns is triple that of the average market. And most people, they just think of my work as, oh no, that's a nice metric. It's a little bit better than satisfaction, but it's not going to change the world.
When you and I, I've got some material that I'm going to share again here, and we may go back and forth a little bit, but when you and I first got to know each other, it was at the end of 2018, and I was interested in the work because I'd read all of your books. It's I have the most profound respect for the work that you've done, and am just tickled that you're here with us today. And I reached out to Bain to say, hey, I think there's an application of this work to the arts and cultural sector. Would someone be willing to talk to me about it? And it was you who responded back. You responded back because you care about arts and culture. I want to put a pin in that and come right back to it. You invited me to come out to Cape Cod, where you live, I think you're seated right now. And we had a long conversation about arts and culture and loyalty. And you know that in our sector, we've, long time globally advanced the concept of subscription and philanthropy and loyalty. And there's teams of people that work to curate loyalty. You also know, and I shared with you, that loyalty is a complicated term today in arts and culture, because while it's not exclusively true, it certainly is true that many arts and cultural organizations serve an older, wider population. And that is not the point of loyalty, but it's the two concepts have gotten conjoined. We talked about that and more. And you said this to me: any business model that's under stress, this was in the 6th, we turned them into episodes, and this was in the 6th. Any business model that's under stress, it's going to show in the financials, and the response tends to be financial. And yet that's not going to be what gets you back on the path to greatness. And this doing good and the purpose that you explained just now, boy, it applies right now more than ever even, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think everything you do that is really to help your organization succeed, is, you can think of it as selfish. Everything you do that enriches the lives of your customers and essentially puts your artists and your employee, your staff, in a position to do that, that's how you actually enrich the lives of musicians or artists and staff members, is you as leaders put those people in a position to enrich the lives they touch, because that brings dignity and meaning, and frankly, it drives financial prosperity as well. But it's getting cause and effect. I think most organizations have it backwards. They think financial discipline is the goal, and no, it's enriching lives. You have to have financial success is a constraint. You have to have viability, but that comes nowhere near making you a great organization. And when you're in trouble, like today, you tend to just put on those accountant's glasses and start thinking about the financial crisis and do financial things, and forget about the overarching objective of, I guess the reason I'm put on earth is to help enrich the lives I touch.
Yeah, boy. Now you believe this too. The enriching the lives I touch. In arts and culture, we have a tangible, real way of enriching lives, not only in ensuring there are beautiful experiences that enrich my soul or spirit, but also in education and outreach and all kinds of things. And you're a music lover, and you're on the board of an organization that is a choral music performing.
Yeah, I was a singer all the way through school. That was my gift. I had the wisdom to not try and do it professionally, but I do wish I wanted to stay as close as I could. So I've supported choral ensembles and am on the board of one called Skylark. So I'm sure some of the examples I'll give will be what we're doing in that organization, which is based on gig musicians. These are singers who sign up for 5, 6, 7 programs, and but they're not under contract. They're contracted to do it as outside contractors. And now with the economy where it is, their income has gone to zero, which is about as radically a challenge as you can get. But yes, I love many different. I love theater, music, you name it. It's changed my life.
Well, you know that there's a cohort of theater organizations, 6 of them internationally, that are working with us to, with their artistic teams and administrative teams, to integrate the system. So in my early data sharing and point, 15% of the clients, of the organizations that we surveyed, intake that data and turn around and close the loops with their customers. And with this group of theater organizations, we're working to operationalize, align, oh my gosh, the extraordinary things that they're learning. I can't wait to share this with the field as we get through this period, but extraordinary changes in policies and procedures and impact that are being had there. We're learning profoundly in my own organization too, that the system is not a score. It is a ecosystem, a way, a framework to change leader-led, sustainable relationships within and without. And I'm just, you know, that 15% number that is true in arts and culture, this emerged again in the press at the end of last year. Two-thirds of sort of corporate global is using the Net Promoter System, but they're using mostly the score. Most aren't acting, I think.
There was I remember, I think we chatted after this, the Wall Street Journal came out with a front page article about my work, and it was pretty, you know, it was controversial. It said the dubious fad sweeping corporate America, or something stupid headline.
A dubious fad since 2001.
But I think in many ways it was right, because people are applying these ideas in a very superficial and backwards way. So we'll find, what was it, 100 or 150 of the Fortune 500 firms were reporting Net Promoter Scores to their analysts and investors for their quarterly meetings. Right. And some were now putting Net Promoter Score in their IPO documents.
Right.
And those should be audited. And they're just making up their own numbers and trying to, you know, do it reasonably. But the score is so addictive, and that people don't even do it right. So if the people on this webinar learn one single thing, all of this work around Net Promoter is not about the score. It's about a philosophy of all the lives I touch, how many are enriched, how many are diminished. I do need to keep track of that. And this Net Promoter System really helps you gauge success and learn how to do better. But the score, of course, is not the objective. The objective is to enrich a life and turn them into a promoter, who will then be your sales force, your cheerleading organization, and funding organization.
Yeah, as I listen to you talk, I think it's very human nature. You know, we like to be measured, and we like things that can have a quick impact. And the thing that resonated with me about the system, and the reason we absorbed it, and it became so like kindred spirit kind of to us at TRG, is that what we know is the only way to create sustainable relationships with patrons is to create a culture that is leader-led, that enables that. And that is hard work, actually. That's the hard work of developing culture, investing in people. And, you know, it's not to say we picked some from Bain's websites. There are definitely loyalty leaders who are participating with Bain and you, who are doing and investing. So it's not that, there are examples, and we are working within the arts and cultural sector to create them too, of companies that really prioritize and see the results. You spoke of them earlier. They have completely different financial results.
Yeah, if you took that book that you showed the cover of, identified the NPS leader in 17 industries or so. We took all of those companies, and it's been almost 10 years since I published that book. Yeah. We looked at all of those NPS leaders, the highest NPS in their industry sector. And we looked at their total shareholder returns. It was almost triple that of the market on average.
Right.
So this notion of the argument that, boy, when your primary purpose is turning customers into promoters but enriching their lives, that's not the investors might think, oh, no, I want to invest in a company who's going to maximize shareholder value. But if you measure accounting and do all the things that traditional business have been doing, it actually destroys your ability to enrich lives and to earn customer loyalty. And so there's a watch out. A lot of your arts organizations will have successful business people on the boards, and some are going to see business in a light that really is, how much value can I extract from my customers? Whereas these great organizations are really going on a path of, how much value can I give to my customers?
Yeah.
Costco doesn't try to charge you the highest possible price. They try to find a way to give you every ounce of value, as opposed to the car dealer that tries to extract every possible penny from your wallet.
Yeah.
Apple has a great way of saying this. They hire people who look into a customer's heart, not into her pocketbook.
That's a great transition, actually. So this concept of loyalty was important before this crisis. It will be important after this crisis. And
Yeah,
you
I
said to
think
me,
there's no question.
yeah, you said to me, look, we are going to be remembered actually by how we behave now. And at Bain, I want to transition us to some specific ways that some of the things that the team you founded, the loyalty practice team at Bain, they're advancing as they do so excellently, tools that anyone can avail themselves of. And you see evidence of what you've just described here, putting customers and employees really first and at the central spot within. And everyone who's on the webinar today, will make sure you have a link to this, but there's a checklist that the team has at Bain has developed that says loyalty leaders during this crisis are doing these things. They are going on the offense and they're working to stem the threat in some specific ways. And as we've talked about, I want to take some of these specifics and apply them to arts and culture and just have a conversation with you, Fred, about them. And the first category of these 4 areas is about the frontline. And these are some of the top line recommendations and thoughts around loyalty in the context of the COVID crisis that Bain is advancing. Supporting employees, I saw our field do nimbly. The resources that they had at their disposal, it meant people in box offices and guest services about whom we are very bullish. We believe in technology, and we're going to come back to that, but we're bullish on guest services and box offices being supported. This team got activated and really optimized because events were canceled. So customers had to be talked to and invited to donate or get a credit or process refunds. But so we can come back to how employees are supported here in a minute. I want to, but the field has done this pretty nimbly and immediately, working from home, if you can imagine it. But the supporting your customers piece, there's a sub-bullet here in the material that everyone will get that says, listen, you're going to need to anticipate policy changes. And in arts and culture, we have policies: no refunds, no exchanges, only donors get, this is only for subscribers. And what the Net Promoter Group is saying is, boy, this is not the time. And my question to you is, isn't it, how do we justify, and wouldn't we in fact say policies are important at a time of crisis, consistency's important at a time of crisis? What's your reaction to that?
Yeah, I think I agree in a sense, but only the highest level policies, like love thy neighbor as thyself. Treat people the way you'd want a loved someone you really care about treated. The more bureaucratic policies, I think, often are very self-serving and completely inappropriate in a crisis like this. It's easy to hide behind them, and it's even easy to say, gee, if we don't do that, we're in financial trouble. But in a crisis, it's this rare opportunity to actually do something special for people.
Yeah.
I hope I can tell this story quickly enough, but Truett Cathy was the founder of Chick-fil-A. Mm-hmm. We didn't agree on everything, but he's way better than most people who are, for instance, I 2 of my 4 kids are gay, so I understand the frustrations about the Cathys on that dimensions. And yet he said, Fred, I watch for opportunities when my people will get into trouble, when a store operator really is struggling or something personal in their personal lives, because that's the only time they need you. And if you can really deliver something that helps them in those tough times, that's what you can do that makes your life special. Mm. And these are tough times. These are very threatening, scary, and financially challenging. So think of it, instead of, oh my gosh, I'm in big trouble, think of it as, I'm in this rare situation where if I just put my innovative hat on, I should be able to help out my employees and my customers in very innovative ways that they will deeply appreciate and remember for the rest of their lives.
Well, so building on that theme of innovation, the second point is redesigning key episodes. Our theater cohort was just working on this pre-crisis, the experiences that we put customers through in arts and culture are myriad. But to this last point, I was on a webinar with a group of executive leaders yesterday, 16 of them across North America, and we were talking about, okay, around this concept of injecting wow factors. Okay, we all are going to be opening our buildings soon. Let's imagine how we could do that in a way that both keeps our teams and our audiences safe, because that will be key in creating confidence and in being good stewards and shepherds of our organizations. Absolutely a priority, and we need resources and funding to help us make that robust and good. And yet, how can we ensure that when we open our doors, we aren't making our patrons feel like they're standing in the queue for TSA post 9/11, that it can be extraordinary.
The Net Promoter feedback process at its essence started out with just 2 questions. It's how likely does he recommend us to a friend, 0 through 10, and what's the primary reason for your score? Why do you feel that way? That's been expanded by my daughter, who it finally convinced me that there needed to be a 3rd question. Her name's Jenny, by the way, and I serve on the board of a First Service, among others, and they call it the Jenny question there.
Yeah.
The Jenny question is for the promoters only. Don't waste everyone's time, but for promoters and maybe for passives, the 7s and the 8s, ask them, is there anything else we could have done to make your experience more exceptional? And that answer is the way that you can feed the innovation pipeline. And often it does merit a callback, a closing of the loop to understand why they feel that way. And gee, we thought we were already doing that, but you're obviously not experiencing that. But I think this notion of always close the loop with a detractor, because something went wrong and you want to understand how to fix it, and not just for that customer, but for the system, so it doesn't happen again to other customers. But then if there's a suggestion to make the experience greater, just calling that customer back and acknowledging that you read it and cared about it will just blow them away, because so few organizations do that. And I think getting customer feedback, not just about what you're doing wrong, but what you could be doing better in a steady flow, is what you need to do in a crisis like this, where the changes is coming so fast.
Right, and in the context of that reopening scenario, we're going to do the best job we can, and being able to ask and close loops and get specific answers about how it feels and what the customer response is. There's the 3rd of 4 is about digital, and really the customer experience, the CX reference here. I think the intention is technology can help, and it can be a guide, and rapidly identifying opportunities. One of the key ways that NPS helps organizations is to benchmark against other sectors. This is just my opportunity, Fred, to take a minute to remind this assembled group that our sector benchmark is doing just that. And your free joining enables you, this is the most recent dashboard that helps us understand, this is a UK organization, how, if you follow on the furthest left category, this theater's new customers are buying at a lower rate, orange bar, than is the rest of the benchmark. And so this kind of data helps leaders, loyalty leaders who are interested in that sustainable relationship, have the right information, have the right tools that helps us scale. And scaling right now is really key, especially when we have lower staffs, reduced staffs, and we're under stress. The last piece that I wanted to just get your take on, and then we're going to move to questions, open questions of you, is around something you said to me early on, which is test and learn, test and learn.
Yeah.
And so the recommendations here are about the consumer test and learn, but this middle piece, gathering employee feedback, I should emphasize the right word, employee feedback, and regular huddles during a time of crisis. Really, I'm observing that because there are fewer staff resources than normal, and because we're working from home, our sector is getting very nimble about the way that it's working. But a part of the Net Promoter System that's real and critically important is building trust and culture. And right now it's as important than ever, isn't it?
Yeah, and I'd loop in this notion of the digital experience. Skylark, the company, the vocal ensemble that I've served on the board of and have been deeply committed to, Skylark Vocal Ensemble. You should go to their website. They're a small startup, but it's a fellow who I went to college 25 years after me and was the choral director of the same group, and then came to Bain & Company after me. Now runs Skylark, and what they've done is recognize they're not going to have normal live audience for a long time. And so they need to supplement what they do for their audience by creating digital content, not just like everybody else, but something that really gives a deeper connection to the art, to the musicology, to doing Lipton, who used to interview the actors, or they're doing that with their artists. But it's creating a digital content that is going to help them maintain relationships with patrons and their artists and employees, and hopefully fund that partially. Yeah. But I'm sure over the longer haul, that is going to be part of what they deliver, not just their traditional in-person audience experience. Yeah. So I think for all of you, think about how to respond with digital in the crisis, but then how does this actually force us to be smart on how to have a much deeper and more personal relationship with our audiences. And then of course with your employees, it's the same thing. How do I at Bain we have weekly huddles to talk about how we could do a better job for our customers and how we can work more effectively together as teams. I think every organization needs to have a similar rhythm. And when is there crisis, many of the huddles have gone from weekly to daily check-ins, because people are feeling so stressed out, not just about their normal jobs, but how they're going to get childcare and what they're going to do with their grandparents in the nursing home. Then people need to be to help one another in all those different dimensions.
The call that one of the conversations that was happening just prior to ours was with our client, the Toronto Symphony, Fred, and I just want to give them a shout out. Their patron services leader is doing these daily huddles with their box office team. And at the end of every day, he's asking, it's a version of the Net Promoter question, but it's retooled and reworded appropriately right now to ask on a 0 to 10 scale. In essence, am I as your leader delivering what you need? Open narrative request response. How could I do that better? Every day he's doing that.
No, I love that. And that notion of how could I make your life better? You use different words and you use a different process, but that's what you want to do with your teams, your employees, and that's what you want to do with your audiences. And in the case of Skylark, we want to do it with our musicians as well, the artists.
Absolutely. The connection between artist and community.
Right.
As important now as ever. And in fact, to your digital point, our TRG 30 last week was entirely around this. This sector has marshaled digital content and sent it, made it available, like lickety split. They were on that. And now they're starting to do what you're describing, innovating around how we can curate that content and make it available to different segments in different ways as a first stage. And then also explore the ways that digital means and channels can be something that we continue with on and past this crisis. It might be supplementary and additive.
And be very careful about just giving it away. I actually think if you can charge for it, then you know you're creating something that's really special and valuable, as opposed to just wasting a lot of people's time.
Yeah, but that's a whole nother talk show, Fred. That's one that we are really honed in on too. Some of it must be free because we have to be we have to have the right kind of connectivity that suggests what this quote that I want to transition us to questions with suggests. We want to be available. We want to serve and enrich lives. And for some, and that needs to be free, but for some. But then there's other content that you're absolutely right, wants to be curated and managed in a way that that conveys value, and yes, that allows people to invest in it. So now, Stephen, I think you're going to help us take questions from the field in real time for Fred. And while we're doing that, help us navigate and remind us what's coming up.
Yeah, absolutely. The Q&A button on your screen is the place to submit, but we've got a lot of questions. So
Sure.
we're going to jump to those pretty smartly. But as you submit the final questions, just a reminder, TRG 30, we're pleased to say, is going to continue after today. Today was the last of our first 6 sessions. New dates are now added, and next week we welcome Byron from Charcoal Blue, who has written a really interesting paper on what happened to our industry during the Spanish flu in 1918. But we're not just going to be going back in time. In next week's TRG 30, we'll be talking about what we can learn for that as we prepare for one day reopening and beyond. So you will need to register again for the next set. You'll go to the link on the screen and we'll follow up with you via email today. But on to questions, Jill, and if you'll unshare the screen so we can see us all.
Yeah.
Fred, there are 3 particular questions around the same theme, which is around communication fatigue with audiences right now. In some cases manifesting in lower responses, lower open rates, and a feeling that perhaps it might be the wrong time to reach out for patrons. And so there's an interest in what your view on that is. Is the timing right to ask these questions?
We had the Net Promoter Loyalty Forum as a group of 40 or 50 companies that are committed to moving the state-of-the-art forward in loyalty-based management. And Jill showed some of those companies, but it includes Apple, Bain itself. It really is some of the best companies in the world. They struggle with this same issue, and a few customers will say, "Oh, come on, I'm way too busy." But in most cases, those organizations have found that yes, you have to be thoughtful in the communication and make it easy to push it aside. But this is actually when you need feedback, and if those people are serious about listening and taking action, I think this is actually when they need to be to keep asking customers and employees these core questions. Almost no one is bored with being asked, "How can I help make your life better?" if the other end of the equation has actually got the ability to deliver on that.
Some questions around implementation of this in organizations where perhaps the product that's on our stages or in our museums and galleries it doesn't belong to us. So where feedback, particularly on product, might be outside of our control. What advice would you give around implementing NPS in that situation?
Well, you certainly want to know that in the long run, how you display and how you organize exhibits, it should be influenced by how patrons are responding to it. But to get more precise feedback on different elements of the experience, like how it felt getting into the parking lot or commuting into the museum, you can ask the question in a slightly different way that focuses on those parts of the experience that are indeed flexible and should be optimized regularly.
Someone here has said that they do track NPS and our company and our post-show surveys, and their score in the 90s, and you know, I think you answered some of this in your dialogue today around how do we capitalize on when we have a significant number of promoters. How can an organization use that to their advantage, particularly in the situation that we're in now?
Yeah, this too is almost a session in and of itself. But if you have people who are legitimately promoters and they're signaling that they are, it's very important to understand why, what made them a promoter. And if they can tell that story or put it into words, if they're writing it on a digital response, just that act makes it more likely they'll tell that story to other people because it's been put into the part of their brain that's more conscious and they'll do it. So I think for promoters, make sure you remind them why they're so excited and put it in a story format that's easy to share. And then figure out what it was that we wowed them, and then how can we do that more often operationally so that we create those special events that are promoter generating.
One of the things that we're learning from this theater cohort, Fred, is just precisely this, the power of promoters. And a question that came up that may be what we're hearing too today is around referrals and how we optimize referrals. It's in fact part of the loyalty math. Can you just talk about an example or give us how to characterize for us how you would optimize on referrals? Are you asking customers directly for them, and how do you measure it?
I think you make it very easy for them to refer. You make the stories easy to tell. You make it very easy for them to invite people to join them and feel like insiders.
Yeah.
You don't bribe them, and I don't think you hector them, but I think a way of gently reminding is completely appropriate. And I'll go back to Skylark. One of the coolest lessons that Matthew, the founder, he taught all of the patrons about the economics of a gig artist's life. And he just, in a very simple way, laid out, here's what her income looks like in a normal year. And here's what just happened and when her taxes are due. And it just brought it to life. And I think that story is getting told everywhere. Mm-hmm. So there are creative ways to retell stories, and in some of those stories can actually help serve the constituent that you're appealing to.
Our last TRG 30, Stephen, we talked about this, about allowing advocates in our parlance, Fred, you're familiar with that too, donors, ambassadors, members, tell the story about why they continue to do this even during this crisis.
And it's so important because they sort of forget themselves until they're asked to tell it. And then they remind themselves.
Yeah. Stephen, what else is out there?
Should the question be adjusted to today's situation? So, a particular question around, do you plan to come back instead of recommend? How can we adjust this potentially, or should we even, to test consumer confidence right now?
Yeah, I think it's certainly the preamble, the survey request and how the context it's set should certainly be adjusted for COVID craziness. And I am completely open to adjusting the question to serve your needs better. But the magic around recommend to a friend is, it has to do with, yes, of course I wouldn't recommend it unless I was going to go back myself. But it's a higher standard than I'm going to go back myself. It says I'm going to co-brand my personal reputation with your organization and go out and try and get others to join me, and that's taking a risk. So recognize you're taking the highest standard that we've found, and if you bring it back to, do I plan to come back? Yes, you're at a lower standard. That may be a very relevant issue, but don't think that that's the long-term correct way to get at creating more promoters.
I wonder if we might finish a question, maybe a reinforcement about why this is important right now today. Why should we be considering this at this time right now? And Jill, may be speaking for our sector here around why we should think about making sure now is the moment to engage here.
Yeah, I think in good times, the businesses that have the highest ratio of promoters to detractors, they have great total shareholder return. They grow faster. They have built-in organic growth. But when things are very tough, those are the ones that survive, and the others go away. So I think in a really a existence-threatening time, which we're in, I wouldn't mess around. I think in the arts, this is very, very challenging. So I don't think there is another way to fight through this that makes sense, other than making sure that all of our energy is going to create promoters out of that group of people that we see as our future, the foundation for our future.
I can't add anything to that. The resiliency of our sector depends on our sticky and sustainable, authentic relationships with our customers and stakeholders. Just period, it does. And this framework and attention from a leadership point of view is, in our estimation, one of the most important frameworks for it. Fred, thank you so much for your thoughts today that are so important and inspiring to us as we face this time as a sector. I'm such a personal geeky fan of your work.
Thank you.
And am just delighted that you could be with us today.
Still my pleasure. And tell the folks to go to the LinkedIn blog that I write to get more ideas through time.
We absolutely will. That and other material will follow.
Great.
We keep up with you always. The sector will too. Thank you, everyone. Goodbye, and until next week.
Goodbye, everyone.
Take care.